In this week's Post-Executive Council media briefing, reporting to the media is the Chief Secretary, Orville London.
I have got the assurance from the various secretaries that the process for the payment of arrears is going smoothly, and there is every likelihood that we'll be able to meet our deadline of the payment of the bulk of the workers or the employees by the end of August. So I think that everything is on stream, and I know that hundreds of workers to date have in fact received their arrears. I want to make an appeal to Tobagonians. I hope it will be heeded, although I know in the euphoria of plenty money, people don't listen. But I'm really appealing to Tobagonians to utilize the money wisely. What we're having in Tobago is that we're going to have over $200 million shared among Tobagonians in a space of 3 to 4 weeks. And to a certain extent, what we do with that money is really going to determine what are the real benefits to Tobago and Tobagonians. I am getting some reports, anecdotal of course, but I'm getting some reports that are quite disheartening as to how the bulk of this money is being spent by some people. And I want to just remind people that there's still credit unions, there's still the unit trust, there's still the bank. We still have a couple of days for the FCB IPO. And we really have to understand that we were living, and most of us were living quite comfortably without this windfall. And just blowing this windfall, I don't think that is the thing that our foreparents would have liked us to do. This is not how Tobagonians, this is not the tradition of Tobagonians. And I really want to make an appeal to Tobagonians to try to ensure that they think very carefully as to how this windfall is expended, because it's not likely to happen again for a long time. And I think we have to do it in a way that we reap the benefits. As you're aware, I would have met with the Prime Minister on the 14th of June. And at that meeting, there were a number of issues which we would have discussed. I think among the priorities for the Tobago House of Assembly at that meeting would of course have been the question of constitution reform for Tobago and the question of the representation of the Tobago House of Assembly on state agencies. Now, at that meeting, I indicated to the Prime Minister that I recognize that the issue of constitution reform for Tobago had reached something of an impasse. And when public figures have an impasse in public, or when there is a disconnect in public, oftentimes people don't want to be seen to have backed down. And it is in that context that I recommended to the Prime Minister a possible option that could be utilized to resolve that impasse. She asked me to put it in writing, and I have done so, and in fact I sent off a letter to her on the 29th of this month. Basically, the letter would have referred to a meeting, and I would have recommended what I call a reconciliation commission. Now, those of you who would have been following the Tobago House of Assembly over the last many years would recognize that in the Tobago House of Assembly Act, there is a provision for a dispute resolution commission. That dispute resolution commission was, of course, inserted into the act based on the very real premise that there would be occasions when there would be disputes between the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government. Of course, some have to be decided in the court of law. We've done that about 5 times in the past. But the Tobago House of Assembly Act of 1996 did make provision for the resolution of financial disputes. And in fact, it is that Dispute Resolution Commission which is responsible for the kind of band within which we operate when we have negotiations on the budget, the 4.03 to 6.9% band. So what I suggested to the Prime Minister is that we can use that same principle in trying to resolve this particular dispute or this particular disconnect between the THA and the central government. And I did say that in the application of the Dispute Resolution Commission model, the government and the Assembly would each appoint a team of 3 to 5 persons and a chairperson to be appointed by mutual agreement. The Commission will be required to submit a report detailing its consensual position to both the government and Assembly for action by their principals. This report could become the catalyst for further discussion in Cabinet, the Tobago House of Assembly, and in the public domain before debate and final resolution in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. And what I'm saying here is that we have a situation where both the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government are on record as making a public commitment to the reform of the Tobago House, or the review of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, and increased autonomy for Tobago. So the question of the what has already been decided. The challenge, of course, is the how, and I'm putting forward this as a possible option. So I'm waiting the Prime Minister. I'm waiting the Prime Minister. I think by now she should have recovered from a recent challenge and would be in a position where she can, of course, look very seriously at this recommendation. The other issue which I raised in that letter was the representation of the Tobago House of Assembly on state agencies, because we have a very disturbing situation, and to which I referred in the letter. And I just want to share with you one of the paragraphs. That we had a situation where, under the Tobago House of Assembly Act, the Tobago House of Assembly was represented on state agencies that have a critical impact on the economic, social, and cultural facets of life of the people of Tobago. And when the Tobago House of Assembly Act, that's the first one in 1980, the process of providing such representation to the institution of government in Tobago was observed by some legislation and largely by cabinet decision prior to 2010. However, since May 2010, the Assembly has been ignored with respect to such appointments. And in fact, the Assembly contributed to the functioning of over 50 of these agencies in the period ending in May 2010, but has only been invited to provide representation on less than 10 of these entities since then. So the point I'm making to the Prime Minister is that something has to be wrong with a process where, for well over 30 years, the Assembly has had representation on numerous state agencies. And since the advent of this particular government, the Assembly's representation is now down to somewhere in the vicinity of 20%. And the point that I made to her, and I want to reiterate, is that it is not only that it impacts on the Assembly's autonomy, but it also impacts on the effectiveness of these agencies, because many of these agencies have to partner with the Tobago House of Assembly in the fulfillment of their responsibilities, and therefore in the decision-making process at the board level, because they do not have the input from the Tobago House of Assembly, it is oftentimes extremely difficult for them to make decisions which don't create problems after they have been made. So I am requesting from the Prime Minister that this be reviewed. Among and I just want to give you an idea, some of the agencies where the deficiency exists are the Airports Authority, the Environmental Management Authority, the Institute of Marine Affairs, National Training Agency, National Maintenance, Training and Security Company, Public Transport Service Corporation, PTSC, Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Can you imagine that the Port Authority that deals with transportation between Tobago and Trinidad, which I think is more critical to Tobagonians and Trinidadians, that the THA is not represented there. TNTech, we now have finally got a letter from the minister giving us an offer of representation on the TDC. But to date, we're not in any way representative of MASA. These are only some of the boards on which there is no representation. So, and I also went further, you know, even if you don't get what you think you deserve, you've still got to ask for other things which you also think you should have. I propose the expansion of THA representative in state agency decision-making to include the Central Bank, the Central Statistical Office, the Board of Inland Revenue, the Services Commission, and the Extractive Industries Transparency Institute. So basically, I only raise these two issues because, as you're aware, the Prime Minister is committed to meeting with me once every quarter, so that we should have another meeting scheduled for somewhere in September. So I didn't want to crowd this particular missive with too much other issues which I'll raise in subsequent meetings. Copies of the letters are available, or the letter available, and you can treat with them. While we're on the subject of meetings, I just wish to report that on Monday, a team from the Tobago House of Assembly met with a team from the Ministry of Finance. This I think to be something of an improvement in the process in recent years. As you know, under the Tobago House of Assembly Act, the Tobago House of Assembly will prepare its budget debate and so on and send the documents. We must send them to the Ministry of Finance by the 30th of June. Now, as you're aware, the budget is not normally read until maybe September, in one case at least in October. So during that 3 months, very little happens. And what you find occurring, or what has occurred over the last many years, is that maybe a week or two before the budget is read, we are called to a meeting, and as I indicated to the Minister of Finance, that meeting is really about the arithmetic of the budget rather than about the development aspects. Because by that time, all the decisions have been made, and basically this is an exercise to ensure that the government fulfills its legal obligation to give Tobago its minimum 4.03%. And therefore, when you do that, you end up with a situation where you are provided with funding, most of it skewed towards the development, towards the recurrent side, and we have what I called almost institutionalized underdevelopment, because all of us are aware that you with an economy like Tobago's economy, except you have a focused and meaningful financial flow into the development aspect, so that you're able to focus on those areas that you need in order to jumpstart the economy, you are going to have challenges. And therefore, the purpose of this meeting, a couple of weeks at least, even although it was a little late, before that other meeting where we deal with the arithmetic, is to have the minister understand why it is that the Tobago House of Assembly wishes to go on a particular path, and how it is that we will want to have that exercise funded. Fortunately for us and for the minister, we had the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan, which I think gave a pretty clear idea of what we had done over the past 5 or so years, our shortfalls, our achievements, our accomplishments, and of course recommendations for the way forward. What our plan is for the next 4 years, and the implementation process. So we're able to make the case to the minister and his team. And among the areas on which we would have focused would be funding for what I consider to be the non-negotiables. In other words, you have a situation where it is accepted that certain things in Tobago have to be done. They must be done. But then you end up being frustrated because the funding is either not given or the funding is grossly inadequate. Let me give you an example. For example, in housing, we would have made a commitment to the people of Tobago to provide 400 houses per year over an extended period of time. Now, based on our calculation, 400 houses is going to cost anywhere in the vicinity of $300 million. That basically is what it's going to cost when you take the cost of infrastructural development and of course the actual cost of construction. Last year, our funding for housing was just a little over $20 million. This, of course, is exacerbated by the fact that unlike the central government, and I made the point to the minister, the Tobago House of Assembly does not have the option to source of budget funding. We can't raise bonds, we can't borrow money, we don't get grants, and so on. And we have been attempting to negotiate with the various governments, and not just this government, all the governments, and said, listen, when the country gets funding for housing, give Tobago a portion, just as how you give Tobago a portion of the regular allocation. We have never got a positive response on that. Also, within the Tobago House of Assembly, we have had situations over the past couple of months where developers have come to us, just as how they've gone to Trinidad, and said, listen, we will finance and construct a number of houses. There are housing complexes in Trinidad where finances are building over 1,000 houses. And then there's an arrangement between the financier and maybe HDC or the ministry so that the distribution and the repayment is done in a particular way that the houses are made available to the clients, and of course the financiers are comfortable that they will make back their money with some profit. This option is not available to the Tobago House of Assembly, and therefore our position with the minister is not necessarily that you should give us all the money in the budget, but provide us with the kind of options that will make it possible for us to access the funding. There are some other issues, some other areas that are fundamental to the development of Tobago. The question of the airport and its impact on tourism, the question of the venture capital, the question of a Tobago Development Bank, the issue having to deal with the kind of concessions that should be given so that Tobago will be able to compete, so that Cove will be able to compete with Tamana and the other industrial estates. So we had a fairly comprehensive discussion. As I said, I am not aware of what the response from the minister would be, but he seemed to be quite amenable to some of the suggestions that we have made. We are going to document all of that, send it to him, and then we expect that when we have our follow-up meeting just before the election, that we would see some of those initiatives or some of those areas dealt with in a way that is favorable to us. As you're aware, the Attorney General and his team would have determined two things with respect to the Milsherv issue. I've already spoken about, the Milsherv message and what it says to us as Tobagonians about the need for us to, to look behind the viciousness and the maliciousness and to get to the facts. And when you go to the court, you have to give the court the facts. And based on the facts before the court, the Attorney General and his team were forced to withdraw the judicial review action against the Tobago House of Assembly, Milsherv and First Citizens Bank, and to convert it into a constructive summons. And basically what that means is an interpretation of the law. And I think all of you who are here would know that that has been our position all the time. We would have made the point that 5 times between 1980, when you had the first Tobago House of Assembly Act, and today, and up to that time, the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government have gone to court. Sometimes it was the Assembly that took the central government to court, the central government took the Assembly to court. I even indicated to you, and that action is still continuing, that the Assembly had taken the central government to court with respect to the reforestation issue. So the question of us going to court to have the powers of the Assembly or the powers of the central government with respect to the Assembly determined was not a big thing. But of course, it was that pre-election season and the opportunity to, vilify and to denigrate. They didn't want to pass up that opportunity, and therefore what should have been a simple matter of interpretation became this big hullabaloo about Milchev and collusion and so on. But that has been decided. And the second aspect, even though he was not asked, and I want to make that very clear, we never asked the Minister of Finance for permission. But because as far as we're concerned, we felt we had the right to do it. But the minister has still gone ahead and approved all aspects of the Milchev transaction, all aspects. Whether it was the initial arrangement, whether it was the arrangement with the bank, whether it was the leases, the minister said, I approve. And therefore one has got to conclude that except the minister himself is going to be willing to collude in malfeasance, that these transactions were valid from the start. It means therefore, that Milchev is a go. Milchev will go ahead. My information is that the developers have already started making arrangements to have a remobilization, and I'm certain that the information as to when work should restart, that information should be made available sooner rather than later. I also want to report that on Tuesday we met with the National Insurance Board with respect to the construction of the NIB building. I don't want to call it a mall because I think we made the point that the footprint of that building is not what one considers a mall. You can call it a center, you can call it a shopping center, you can call it whatever, and I think there is some consensus on that. It's really not a mall, it's a shopping center, because the footprint of a mall, I think and the concept of a mall is different from that. But I think we were able, and that they did in fact send the user brief to the Tobago House of Assembly and ask the Tobago House of Assembly for its input. Because I think you'll remember that at our meetings we have been attempting to get across to them, and I think that they have been quite amenable in recent times, get across to them some of the issues which we consider critical. Again, I want to use the term non-negotiable from our perspective. And among them, and we discussed this, and I think they seem to agree, is that the user brief, and not only the user brief, but the management of the process should ensure that there is opportunity for the past tenants of the mall to be given favorable treatment. There should also be there is the opportunity for small Tobago businessmen not to be crowded out by their more affluent rivals. That the mall should take into consideration the fact that Tobago is still a tourism-oriented area, and that there should be some synergy with the Esplanade. That there should be adequate parking, that the Tobago House of Assembly and the people of Tobago should be consistently consulted, and of course that the ambience, the design and the ambience and so on should fit into the concept that we have of the Scarborough Enhancement Plan. So we had a meeting that lasted close to an hour. They made a presentation, and the discussions will continue. They have indicated that the demolition process will start before the end of this month. That, I think, according to the information, should go for about 10 weeks. Very soon, when the user brief is finalized, the RFP will go out. I think they have 7 shortlisted contractors, and they have given a time of 18 months for the completion of the building. So because of loopholes in the legislation, you had situations where persons were speculating in land in Tobago to the disadvantage of Tobagonians and the Trinidadians, and of course to the detriment of the economy. And that is when we intervened. The way in which we intervened and the way in which the process developed, however, sent some unfortunate signals, and there was a feeling that Tobago was anti-investment. One of the areas, as I said, that there were shortcomings was in the process of ensuring that bona fide investors would have the opportunity to invest in Tobago in the most favorable climate. And part of the problem was because the application process was unpredictable and lengthy. And at the meeting which was held where between the THA, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Tourism, the Tobago Chamber, and the THTA, on the 14th of July at the Magdalena, decision was made to set up a committee to treat with those issues, to deal with finding ways and means to make Tobago more perceived to be more user-friendly, to deal with the whole process for the allocation of license, and of course to deal with to attract investment into the designated development areas. And maybe I should explain what I mean by that. In order to encourage investment and in order to protect the nationals, what we said is that we will identify in Tobago designated development areas. These are areas where the strictures with respect to the Foreign Investment Act will not apply. In fact, where we will have the kind of regime which will allow for investors to have a better opportunity and to have an advantage and to have all the various concessions which will make us competitive with the other islands in the region. So we had a look at that again, and recommendations were made by the committee, which was headed by Mr. Neil Wilson. The other members were Ms. Diane Haddad of the Chamber of Commerce and Mr. Chris James of the Tobago Hospitality and Tourism Association. And they were given a very tight deadline of 14 days, and I want to compliment them that they have, in fact, completed the report. The report has gone to the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Tourism, to the Minister of Finance, and of course the Chamber and the Hospitality and Tourism Association. And we will be hopefully meeting on this, because it is the implementation of these proposals and the fast tracking of that process, and of course the provision of the kind of incentives that will make this whole thing worthwhile. So that is on, and I really want to again reiterate my commendation to those individuals.
Thank you for tuning in to another Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing for the week ending August 10th, 2013.